Good morning and welcome back to the Good Morning Minute podcast. I'm your host, Angelina Mojica, and I'm excited to kick off season 2 with a theme that touches every single one of us: relationships. That's right, friends. Relationships are at the heart of our human experience. They shape who we are, how we grow, and how we show up in the world. Whether it's family, friends, romantic connections, or even the relationships we have with ourselves, each one carries lessons, challenges, and moments of pure joy. This season, we'll sit down with incredible guests who will share their stories, wisdom, and insights on building, nurturing, and even healing relationships. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's dive into conversations that inspire connection and growth. Now that we've set the stage for today's conversation on relationships, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest. She brings a unique perspective and a wealth of experience to the table, and I know her insights will leave you feeling inspired and equipped to navigate your own relationships with more intention and understanding. So please join me in welcoming Haley Straw to the Good Morning Minute podcast. Haley, we are so excited to have you today and can't wait to get to know you better.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So let's just jump into it and talk. Let's introduce yourself and just share a little bit about your knowledge and interest in talking about relationships.
Okay, I never thought I would be talking on this subject. I was raised Mormon in Portland, Oregon. Got married the Mormon way in the Mormon temple, and had my family, stayed at home, raised my 6 kids, homeschooled, home birthed them. Moved to Missouri with my husband and 6 kids about 9 years ago, and I became acquainted with the Amish. Upon moving out here, I didn't know anything about the Amish before. There are no Amish in Oregon, right? So they asked me to start driving for them because they hire people with big vans, which I had because I have 6 children. They hire them to drive them all over the country to weddings, funerals, reunions, doctor appointments, counseling. Pretty much that's where I drive them. So I really got an intimate view into the Amish world and to how they operate and to how their relationships operate.
Beautiful. That's awesome. So you're going to bring a very unique perspective on relationships. So just a little bit about your own understanding in relationships. So you mentioned being Mormon, and I know that there are particular values and traditions that come along with that. So let's just get started there, and then we'll kind of transition into more questions about the Amish and what you've learned and experienced in your helping them travel across countries there.
Okay, what do you want to know about the Mormon?
Sure. Are you still practicing that faith and tradition, or okay? So what is that like in a marriage setting and parenting?
So I am practicing. Okay, so I was raised in a home with a Mormon mom who was a convert and a Catholic dad. And my mom took me to church, and we were always taught you go and you get married in the Mormon temple, which you have to live a really high standard. Mormon religion, similar to the Amish religion, is a very high demand religion, right? There are certain standards you're expected to live. And so that was my dream growing up. Because that's what I was taught. So I got married when I was 20, way too young. And the Amish, they also get married when they're very young like that. And I got married in the Mormon temple just like I was supposed to. And then we ended up getting divorced, which Mormons are not supposed to get divorced. Neither are Amish. We're taught marriages for life. Actually, Mormons are taught marriages for eternity, which is kind of a different take on that. But we ended up getting divorced. And I ended up leaving the Mormon church for maybe 7 years. And I'm just getting back into it. But my eyes are very open, and I question a lot, and I have to be really careful so that I don't get kicked out, right? So that's been my journey in the Mormon church. Raised our children to be Mormon too.
Okay.
But
how does that religion or that faith practice transition into the parent and child relationship?
Mormons are taught to be very hand-on. So there are so many similarities between the Mormons, or the LDS church also is called, and the Amish. We're both pretty patriarchal, right? The husband's job is to provide and protect and lead in both cultures. And the women's job, and this is ideally, right, is to nurture and raise the children and run the home. And so that's what I did, and that's what the Amish do.
Okay. And I
Yeah.
really like the ideals behind the Mormon because it really does put a great emphasis on, marriage and putting work in the marriage, putting work into your parenthood and all of
Yep.
those things. And I really think those are great values to have in any household for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the Amish. What are some of the experiences that you've either seen or what just gone through with all the traveling you do, in regards to like relationships?
So I had an experience right when I was getting to know the Amish. I went to Sarah Gingrich's store. She has a dry goods store. Each community, typically, they have their own dry goods store because they like to be standalone communities so they can stay within their community
Mhm.
within buggy driving distance. And I did something for Sarah. I drove her somewhere for free just because I was going there anyway. And so then um, so she came up to me. I was getting into my pickup truck. She came up to me and she had just a box of fresh produce from her garden, and she gave it to me. And instantly I hugged her, and instantly she pulled back like I had a disease. And I'm like, whoa, what just happened? Because I hug everybody. And so that got me to questioning. And so I had some friends in another community, and I'm like, I have never seen the Amish couple show affection. I said, what's going on with that? And they're like, well, we just don't. We're
Mhm.
just hands off. We just don't show affection. And so I was actually talking to my friend Susie, and I asked Susie, I said, so do you touch your children? She's like, well, when they're little, sure, like we'll hold them. But as they get bigger, like we don't touch them. And I thought, what in the world? That's so foreign to me. They're just so hands off as married couples and with their children as a general rule, at least the lower order were. I was shocked because I touch my children, I hold them. I still sit on my mom's lap when I go see her, and she still rockers me, and
Mhm.
I'm a grown woman. But it's just,
My Yeah, my adult children do the same thing
oh,
when they
did they?
come home. Just to have, it's almost like just coming back into a safe comfort zone and just knowing that everything's going to be okay. So I do that with them, and they are 19 and older. So I totally get it and understand. Um, so as you're describing this, have you ever, are you familiar with like the five love languages?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just assuming that the love language is more acts of service rather than physical. Like they are intentional with their duties. So do you think relationship is more duty oriented or task oriented?
Oh, hardcore. Like that's the foundation of everything that they believe is
Mm-hmm.
their relationship with their spouse, because families, well, God first and then family and then community is how their priorities work. But their goal in life is to pick a spouse that they will be married to until they're dead, because divorce is 100% not allowed in Amish land at all.
Mm-hmm.
Separation doesn't happen. So they have to be really intentional in picking that. And then their life is, I've heard from a lot of people that have left the Amish, and not so much the Amish themselves, but those on the other side, that the way to heaven is through works. And so, yes, they are very much a works oriented um, people as
Mm-hmm.
far as that goes. So yeah, so physical affection, and that would probably not be on their top priority list. And it's hard because I've seen the way they treat their children, because I've driven all over the country for years with them, and they're just not as loving or as gentle as I would be. But that's not their
Mm-hmm.
priority. Their priority is work to get to heaven. That's the goal of this life, is to get to
Mm.
heaven. So
That is interesting. And I mean, taking the religious part of it out or the religion part of it out, I mean, there's other families in in the United States that operate in that same mindset as well. Uh, and I think so works is the main foundation. Like I have to work and be the mother. So they really take on the identity of wife or mother. Have you seen any struggle when children grow? Um, or any struggle in that transition? Like we would I myself are like 19 and older kids. So as they transitioned out of the home and into independent adult living, that was a transition for me. And because I am affectionate and I give words of affirmation and all that stuff, like that hit hard for me, seeing my children leave the nest, so to speak. And I wonder if you've witnessed that in the Amish community.
Like they feel like there's not work to do because their kids are gone, or
Yes, something
almost.
like that. Or is there like just a struggle in the transition? I just wonder.
I don't think there's a struggle because typically when children get married, like their average family size is 7 children, and I've seen up to 16 with one family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they have big families. A lot of people in my community have 10 children. There's always something to do. There are always grandchildren.
Oh, okay.
Like when I would drive them to weddings or funerals, oftentimes I'll pick up the whole family and then I'll drop some of the children off at like another person in the community's house and they will nurture them. So there's always a role to play of aunt or grandmother or uncle, even if it's not to your own children and your own grandchildren, because the community really is an overgrown family. And it's really beautiful to see because there's always somebody there when you need them, always.
So do you think there's success in like it takes a village to help raise these
Oh,
children? So I see that. So there's a community relationship. So what is that like? I mean, you're talking about supporting other families with their children, their grandchildren. Um, just can you elaborate a little bit more of what you've seen?
well, so I was actually at my friend Eli's this week just visiting with him, and it was crazy because I was there for 2 hours just talking to him. You know, he's a guy like my father's age in his 60s. He's an elder in the community, and he has a lot of wisdom. So if I have any questions or I need anything, like I go to him. So, but I was just there, and a guy named Samuel, he comes up, he just pops up with his horse and buggy, and he walks in the house, and he's like, "Can I borrow this?" So Eli stops our conversation. He goes, he helps Samuel get what he wants, and then he goes back, and then we're talking, and then Roman, another elder in the community, shows up. Horse and buggy comes in. They chat for a while. He was letting them know that there was a death in a neighboring community, and they've got to get funeral things going. You know, so it's just. Oh, you know, it's just, I don't know. That's just how it is. It's just people just show up like they live there and they help each other. And I remember when I was growing up, people used to do that. I
You
don't
know,
see
I
that anymore.
Yeah, I don't see that anymore. And it's funny that you mentioned that. So I work in the child welfare field. Uh,
Oh,
so I'm a social worker. So I see all that stuff. Um, but when I was going to drop off Christmas gifts this past holiday, to our families that are foster homes, I noticed like I hit on a door and they're like, no, that person doesn't live here. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like trying to figure out if where the house is and whatnot. And I made a comment to my coworker, hey, back in the day, you knock on a door and the neighbor would be like, oh, yeah, I know that family. They're across the street or they're right next door. And you just don't see that anymore. So I love this idea of community relationships because I very much grew up in a neighborhood like that where we all just kind of knew each other and, children hung out with neighbor children and whatnot. Um, so how do you feel that strengthens the Amish community from what you've seen or, kind of witnessed with your friendships that you have?
well, okay. So something that I struggled with when I was having babies and I had my first one on the other side, away from my family, right? I was across the country. I
Mhm.
had postpartum. Well, first I was
Mm.
pregnant and I didn't even know how that worked, right? I mean, like, you
Right.
know, what to expect. And I needed support through the pregnancy. And then after birth, I had very severe postpartum depression. Like I had to go to
Mhm.
counseling, I had to get on medication, and I didn't know what was going on. And in the Amish community, when women have their babies, like there's so much support and it's so much of an easier transition for those major life changes because they have these systems built into support. I had to go to outside sources, talk to strangers, be afraid that I would have my baby taken away because I was having these intrusive thoughts, which were horrifying to me. But they have it all built in, so there's peace, there's structure, it's just more fluid. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I guess.
It does. And I take a
Hmm.
pause because the thoughts that are coming to my mind are it's like kind of a midwife knowing and gone through the or like someone, a friend that's gone through the process that maybe has filled those feelings at, postpartum and just really going with an empathetic heart. It's going to be okay. Have self-compassion. So
Yeah.
that's what I hear in my head when you
Mhm.
when you explain that. Um, so let's talk a little bit about your friendships with the Amish community. What does that look like? Because I know you mentioned them giving you a basket of vegetables, and you're like, oh, hug, immediately. That's that's how you express gratitude. But what have you learned about their friendships?
They they're just whatever. Okay, sometimes it feels like in their world it seems like it's expected. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like they have this pool to choose from because they're this community, so it's kind of it almost feels forced, and I hate to say that.
Like I have
But that's
to?
what I've seen. But
Mm.
and they don't and like in the community that I have a farm in, everybody's related, and that happens. Like almost everybody's related. So most of their friends are their relatives, their cousins, their sisters, and so they do activities like a woman friendship within the Amish community would look like they would come over and help after they have a baby, or they would like have a cooking day together, or they would like have a harvest day together where they harvest their garden, or they butcher chickens. Like that's what an Amish friendship looks like, or they make quilts. It's
Mm.
very different than friendships in our world. Theirs is more practical and ours is more frivolous, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Well, yes, we have our spa days and whatever.
Yeah, right. There you go.
But yeah, so I get it. I understand. Uh, so let's look a little bit because they're so intertwined as far as like familial and friendship and there's that connection. What is conflict? Have you witnessed conflict among those relationships?
So, what happens? I haven't outright seen it, but I've heard. Okay,
Mhm.
so they don't have a TV, they don't have radio, they don't have cell phones. Okay, most of them don't read the newspapers except for the Amish newspapers, like the Budget or Plain Interest that comes, and
Mhm.
is that's pretty much where they get their information. So they love to gossip. Okay. So when things happen in the community, drivers find out. So there's conflict. I haven't seen like conflict in my community with families conflicting with each other, but within a marriage, there is a particular couple. I won't say their names,
Mhm.
but they have 10 kids and they hate each other. Okay, they
Wow.
hate each other.
Mhm.
They can, in fact, they were having so many problems. They actually the father was taken to the health department because the community was wondering, did he have mental illness? Like, is there something that can be helped? But and the health department lady, her name was Laura. She's like, no, they just need to get divorced. They would be better off if they weren't together. But the Amish don't divorce, so the community, at least in the one that I live in, they operate. They get a committee together. If there's a conflict, they will get a committee together of 3 men, and those
Mhm.
men will work with the conflicting parties, whether it's spouses or neighbors, and they will try to come up with a solution. And if they need counseling, then they'll get counseling. Does that make sense? They
Mhm.
try to deal with it internally and come at it from a place of, let's come to an agreement, even if we're both miserable, and let's try to do this God's way.
Mhm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense
Okay.
because I mean their understanding is God first. And
Yeah.
so I mean, and you mentioned in the beginning, when they marry for life. So till death do us part. They take those vows very seriously. Um, so I understand. And so you see that community. How often do you see um leadership welcomed from the women? Because I hear 3 men get together and they make those decisions. And I know just coming from an outside perspective, women stepping into more of a masculine role. Do you see that often in the Amish community at all? No.
I can't. Okay, so as a driver, it's the men that call
Mm-hmm.
me. But once in a while, I've had to chuckle because like there's one woman and they're moving to a more modern community. The lower order
Mm-hmm.
communities, typically the men, like 100%, they run the
Mm-hmm.
show. But just once in a great while, I get a call from a woman, and I'm like, that woman, that's cool. Yeah, it's just so, so, so rare because the men are the decision makers, the women obey.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I haven't seen them. They don't have leadership roles in the church ever that
Mm-hmm.
I've ever seen or ever heard of. They're just their role is in the home. That's it.
So very much the ideal of the man is the head of the household, so that's where everything falls, responsible and liable for all the family decisions and mistakes too, I assume. So that can be hard for a man to bear sometimes as well. Um, I don't
Yeah.
know.
And back to that family where that husband and wife are still in conflict and they have 10 kids. Like I was talking to Eli about it, and he's like, he has to stay in the home. They have to stay together because he has to provide. He has to
Mhm.
protect. Like he can't leave that responsibility. So, and she still has to nurture the children. Like that's her. They cannot leave those responsibilities at all. And there's time.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah.
That is so interesting. Well, so Haley, as we get ready to wrap up, if there was a piece of advice for, let's just say a struggling couple, because these are great values and traditions. Like they really take marriage and family relationships seriously too, and I think that is something that has been lost across all, all aspects of life. But if there was a piece of advice that you could offer through maybe your experiences or things that you have gone through yourself, what would that be?
Well, I'll just share a couple things that I have learned from the Amish, and I love Amish proverbs. Like Suzanne Woods Fisher, she writes a lot about the Amish. She has a book.
Mhm.
It's called Amish Proverbs. Anyway, I just eat them up. But the Amish, I've really seen them. They're not perfect because they're human, but they follow this. It says, "Do unto others as if you were the other." Like
Mhm.
they try to live that creed. Does that make sense? And
Mhm.
so many of us don't. We're for ourselves, but they're for
Mhm.
each other. They're for the greater good, for the community, for God.
I think that's a beautiful proverb. And it's also kind of like a golden rule that I've heard because I grew up Catholic.
Okay.
And so now I'm more just non-denominational, but uh, and I've experienced divorce 3 times in my life. And I mean, again, it doesn't take away from the idea that I do value relationship, but it just, I think being outside in a community that doesn't hold that as a strong value, staying married and whatnot, it does make it easier to get out of situations that aren't healthy. So, and that was kind of my situation. But I think those proverbs are well, and the golden rule is, treat others as you want to be treated is where I'm going with that. And I think that is a beautiful message to send out to our listeners as well. Haley, is if someone wanted to get in contact with you outside of this podcast, how can they do so?
Well, I have a Facebook page. It's at Haley Strauss 6, and I'm on TikTok, Driving the Amish. And I also do um, some stories that don't make it into my books. I post them on Substack. It's just at Amish Taxi Driver. So I'm kind of all over the place.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And where can we purchase your books if we're interested?
They're on Amazon.
Amazon. All right. Well,
Yeah.
everyone, I want to thank Haley for being a guest on our show today. She has given us some great insight and different perspective from a different kind of community out there in the world. Thank you so much, Haley, for being a guest. And for those that are listening, you know who I am. I'm Angelina Mojica, your life coach, sending you much love, much peace, many blessings.